Welcome back to the Equipping ELLs podcast. I'm Beth Vaucher and I'm your host, and this is the show that equips passionate educators like you with the tools, strategies, and support to make a lasting impact on your English learners. If you're heading into a new school year feeling unsure about how to support your ELLs, whether you're new to ESL, juggling a caseload in multiple buildings, or a content teacher with multilingual learners for the first time, this episode is here to give you a clear, simple plan. Because here's the truth. How you start the school year matters. When you start strong, building trust, setting up simple systems, and focusing on what matters most, you'll reduce stress, avoid overwhelm, and create a smoother plan for your students and yourself all year long. So today I'm walking you through exactly what I would do in the first 30 days to go from overwhelmed to confident in supporting English learners. Let's dive into your week by week game plan. First week, your only job is going to be to connect and observe. So don't stress about fancy lessons. Now, yes, you need some materials, you need some resources to have in place. Otherwise, those students walking in are going to feel very overwhelmed, and you are as well if you don't have things to do. But it doesn't have to be over the top, fancy. You don't have to have all these things planned. Don't worry. The foundation of successful language support starts with trust and understanding. So here's what I would do. First, greet every single student warmly and learn how to pronounce their name correctly. Make it a really fun activity. Have everybody in the classroom record on your voice phone, on your voice recorder, how to say their name and add it to a QR code. Create a bulletin board of all their different names and how to say them and things about them and have them draw pictures. There's things that are very simple that you can do that can really help you as the teacher learn how to pronounce their names and also help others in the school learn how to pronounce their names. So start there, learn their name correctly, do an activity around that. There's so many great books out there that help to hit on that, the importance of names. Second, I would use visuals and body language to introduce myself. So I might prepare a slideshow for my students so that I can show who I am, about my family, about my interests, about my hobbies, things that help my students see who I am and us to build that connection. When you model that, it helps your students to want to open up and share more about who they are. So it starts with you. Introduce yourself with visual supports. I would have students complete a simple getting to know you activity, adapted for their language level. If it's a group of newcomers, it's going to probably not involve any language, right? You want to make a space where they're able to share about themselves without talking. And that's not as hard as it sounds. Doing a simple activity like drawing themselves and putting some things that they like with pictures or what they don't like with pictures. Maybe cut out a bunch of pictures beforehand and they can choose different types of foods, different movies, different sports, and they can paste those onto their picture. So that's a really simple activity with one page, one sheet of paper. Draw themselves, add things they like, add things they don't like. Without talking, you're able to see what do they like? How can you connect with them? How can you use that in your lessons to build on that? Make it simple. It doesn't have to be complicated, but find ways to get to know them. Start casual conversations. What do they love? What languages do they speak at home? Again, this can be done without your students having to speak at all. And if they've already been in the program for a while, they're not newcomers, then you can expect more of them in response to you. But if they are newcomers, you want to be really sensitive to that. This is where I love to do activities like 4 corners or even just 2 corners, where maybe you put different things in the corners and you say, okay, if you speak this language at home, go to that corner. If you speak this language, go here. If you're from this country, go here. Maybe it's just a way that you're going to prompt them with information and let them respond. You know, if your favorite sport is this, go to this corner. So without talking, they're going to get up, they get to move, and they get to share a little bit more about themselves. And it also helps them to see connections within their peers, because it's not just about you creating that atmosphere for them. It's about them also gaining that trust and respect with their peers. It's a really important piece of this. So the more ways that your students can get up, move, talk during this first week and build those connections, the better. In that first week, you also want to observe how they interact in different settings. Group work, transitions, independent work, just really you want to become an observer of your students. You want to become an investigator of who your students are, because that is what's going to help you set up the rest of the year for success. When you really learn who these students are, what they bring into your classroom, and how can you create an environment where each one of your students can thrive. During this time of year, something that we sometimes overlook because we have so much going on as an ESL specialist and we have all these students to get to know, that we don't want to overlook opportunities to connect with content teachers. So make sure to leave a little space in those first couple weeks to go, especially that first week, make sure they know who you are if you're new to the school, what kind of support you can offer, and just asking them a simple question, something like, what's one thing I can do to help your ELLs feel successful this month? Helps you to open the door to show that you're in support of them, you're for them, and you're working together to help your multilingual students, whether they're in the content classroom or in your classroom. You want to work together. And that's a really powerful piece to the success of your multilingual learners, is that collaboration piece. There are things that can make this easier to get set up and started. So I want to show you some tools that we have inside of Equipping ELLs that can help make this much easier. So things like our bilingual picture dictionaries. Now, this is our English-Spanish picture dictionary. And this is a very useful tool to help students to start to see, let's think about if they're filling out that, what they like about themselves. Well, maybe they look at their Spanish-English dictionary and they might be able to see, oh, I love when it's cold. I come from a place where it's cold and there's snow. Or, oh, I come from a really hot place. And they can start to see these words and use them. Now, these are also great because there is a QR code that's included on each of the pages, and you can have this sent home with your students. They can scan it, and the parents and the students, and maybe the grandparents and the siblings, they can also learn alongside their students both the English and then the native language. We have these in over 20 languages. So maybe you have a student that is from Ukraine. We have this in English and Ukrainian. We have this in Farsi. We have this in Russian. We have this in, like I said, over 20 languages and counting. So this is a really easy way to have this printed on their desk and just a tool that you can pull out to introduce vocabulary, to help empower them with words, and the visual and bilingual support is really helpful. Now, like I said, you also can provide some newcomer getting to know you activities. Now, we have a variety in the membership along with our Inspiring Young Learners Teachers Pay Teacher store that you can go check out. They're icebreaker types of activities that have visual support, sentence stems, and things that your newcomers or intermediate ELs can do without feeling the pressure of having to be put on the spot in that first week of school where they're feeling like they have to talk in front of all their peers, the eyes are on them, they're nervous, it's stressful. We don't want that to happen to your students. So you can check those out in the IYL, Inspiring Young Learners Teacher Pay Teacher store, or inside Equipping ELLs. We are really passionate about helping you have tools to help your students expressing themselves in meaningful ways, even with limited English. That connection piece is so vital. Starting with relationships doesn't just make students feel safe. It makes every strategy you use afterward so much more effective. And that's what I want you to learn, that you are the investigator of your students. So the more that you are able to uncover about them, especially those newcomers early on, the more you're able to pull those pieces in to the strategies and the lessons that you plan. So that's week 1. Let's go into week 2. Week 2, your focus should be on gathering language and academic data. A lot of times we get this switched, right? We start the school year, we assess our students right away, but guess what? I am a firm believer that you are really not going to get a valid result of that assessment if you have not spent some time getting to know your students and for them to get to know you. And so that's why week 1's all about getting to know them. Week 2, then you can start to do some simple assessments. Don't overwhelm them. Don't give them every assessment that you have, because a lot of times if you look at how many assessments our language learners are taking, it is a long list and it's exhausting. So if we think of assessing all 4 domains and then maybe assessing math skills, language or reading skills, letter sounds, fluency assessments, Then we have content, grade level, standards where they need to be assessed. A lot of this happens all within the first couple days of school. So don't do that. It's not going to give you valid results. It's really going to be a waste of your time and their time. Be very careful of choosing which assessments you're going to give them at what time, and talk with the content teacher so that you can work together to make sure that these students aren't being over-assessed. They're not just spending so much of their first couple days or first couple weeks doing assessments. There will be time that you can benchmark and assess them. It will be okay if it doesn't happen in the first couple days. Once you've built that rapport, it's time to understand where your students are academically and linguistically. It is important to assess. Assessments are important, so don't get me wrong. It's just being very intentional and mindful of how we assess and what we're assessing. First, you want to start, before you even assess your students, reviewing their WIDA or their access scores, or if you're in a different state and use a different program, then reviewing whatever language scores you have of that student, if you have any. If they're a newcomer, they might not have any scores. They might have a screener when they entered into the school that you can look at. So review any information that you have on your students that can help you with assessing and grouping your students. If you don't have access to scores, or you're just like how I was and said, well, these scores were from 6 months ago, I'd like to do my own quick assessment, then do some informal checks, okay? So this is where you want to just really narrow down. You can see a lot through giving your student one picture and seeing, can they listen? If you ask them questions and prompt them, do they know the vocabulary? Are they able to speak anything about the picture? Can they write anything about the picture? There's a lot that you could uncover by just using one picture and some simple prompts. So even if you just do that, it helps you to get a good benchmark of where the students are at. We want to constantly be looking at, where are they at with the domains? What language level are they at? Because when you're working with your multilingual learners, a big part is to pinpoint what kind of support they need from you. And the best way to do that, if you're limited on time, and so if you're someone that's doing pull-out sessions a couple times a week, you want to be very clear of what kind of support do they need. Do they need content support, so grade level content scaffolded, or maybe do they need to increase their listening skills, increase their speaking, their reading, their writing skills? Narrowing in on that domain and boosting it up. You could just go based off of their access scores cumulative total, but I'm a firm believer in really breaking that down to see where they're at on each individual domain, and then focusing on the weakest domain to help strengthen that. You can also visit other classrooms. So this is where that collaboration piece is really important. Like I said, seeing how the instruction is being taught and seeing how ELLs are accessing their content, so that you can see again how they might need more support. In my opinion, assessing comes through observation with your students. Again, you're coming back to be that investigator of your students, really identifying where they need that support. If you are thinking, okay, this sounds great, but one, I have a lot of students in my caseload. I don't have time to assess them all. And two, I have access scores, but I really don't understand what they mean. Don't worry, we have got you covered. So this is where we have inside the membership, we have a K through 12 WIDA progress monitoring toolkit, because I am a firm believer that one snapshot of when that access test happens, one happens in the middle of the school year, so that's not really accurate, and two happened a long time ago. So we need some better benchmarking throughout the year so we can have a better idea of where our students are at. So here's just a quick, brief example of what this looks like. It has a student copy, and we try to fit in as much as possible without exasperating our students, because assessing all the time really will overwhelm them and they will not produce as best as they could. And so you can see that, with this, you're going to do listening and speaking and reading and writing. And you're going to have the alphabet, you're going to have vocabulary words, you're going to have reading. All of it is in one, so that you can easily just prompt them with the teacher script, record the results, and have a good baseline to see where they're at in each of the domains. You could also use this at the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and the end of the year, so you can track language growth throughout the year. Now, if you're saying, well, that looks great, but I have a large caseload. We do have that available for both beginners and intermediates for each grade level cluster, and a digital version. So you can share that out with them. They can take that assessment, and then you can have those results graded for you, and then it gives you a better idea of where to begin with your students this year. Why does this matter? Because when you know what your students can do, you stop guessing and start planning with purpose. This week, focusing in on where they're at gives you that clarity. So again, we want to make sure that we are building that relationship first. We're checking in to see where our students are before we dive into any planning and routines and all those other things. These are 2 crucial weeks to start with. Now let's move into week 3. This is where you're going to start to add in some targeted, simple supports. Now that you know your students, it's time to start building language into your instruction. So this is where I have found to be the most powerful piece after getting to know your students, building that trust and assessing, is to begin with some simple routines. What I've seen happen way too often is there's so many different paths you could take to supporting your ELLs. You have so many groups, and it just quickly spirals out of control and becomes very overwhelming. So now you're planning for every single group, every single day, and you're losing a lot of valuable time. And your students really aren't responding to what you're planning. Because what they really need are some simple systems and supports. And you can use these with multiple groups, so you're not planning constantly. And when your students start to understand what is expected of them, they start to make language growth because it's a safe place. They know expectations and they rise to the challenge. For this week, you're going to really focus in on these types of things. Planning one scaffold activity per group that targets their most needed language domain. So again, going back, maybe this group needs to really focus on listening. Let me tell you something. Listening directly impacts speaking, reading, and writing. So if their listening score is poor, spend your time there, because without that piece, they're going to continue to struggle with the other 3 domains. So really identifying what's the domain I want to focus on and how can I scaffold this activity for this group I'm working with. You can also focus on supporting classroom teachers with sentence stems, visuals, or co-taught mini lessons. So it depends on your schedule. Are you doing pull-out lessons? Are you doing push-in lessons? But having just some really simple go-tos that when you push in, you can do this activity, you can do this GLAD strategy, you can use this support. It's going to help you start to develop that muscle to really be able to co-teach well and to provide the support in the homeroom classroom. You also want to find ways that you can daily pull in academic vocabulary in context, or just tier, really with our students, they need tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 words constantly. So how are you going to make that happen in your classroom? I'm going to give you an idea here in just a second. And then also using visuals and real world connections to make abstract more concrete. So just thinking of how can I relate this to my students, their situation, their background experience? How can they be seen in this lesson and really connect to what we're doing right here? So if you can start to think about your week in that way, focusing on those 4 things, you're going to start to develop some systems that your students are going to thrive under. Like I said, really focusing in on how can you incorporate vocabulary growth every single day. I love this activity because it incorporates vocabulary and it incorporates speaking and writing. And so the simplest way to do this, and one of the most powerful, is to have a daily picture prompt that every class, you start with the same routine. So you put a picture up on the board and the students respond to it. Now, why is this great? 1, because there's a visual support, they're learning new vocabulary. 2, you can use that with a variety of different grade levels and groups without having to change it. So this is something that you're not going to have to repeat every group and plan for a different picture every group. You can use the same one. And then 3, it makes scaffolding really easy. So if you're working with mixed groups, you can easily have the newcomers just work on copying down vocabulary and finishing a sentence, where maybe your level 3s and 4s are going to be working on coming up with words themselves and trying to write a sentence or 2. So let me just give you an example. There's a variety of ways that you could do this. And here are some things we have. We have our PWIM, where they're going to look at this picture and they're going to label as many words in the picture. So that may be something you do whole group, where you're just brainstorming whatever words come to mind. And then you're going to go and have them group those words in categories. So again, working partners. You see how much language development is happening when they're doing this activity. So they're going to group words. Maybe they group words by nouns and verbs. think about the variety of words. Now, I'm going to tell you, when you start doing something like this, it's going to feel a little clunky. It's going to feel a little bit frustrating for students. But the more you do it, I promise you, they're going to respond and they're going to blow your mind on how much they adapt to this strategy. And then last is to share or write a sentence. So again, maybe you're newcomers. They're just going to work on coming up with a sentence together. Maybe your language level 3, 4 students are going to write a sentence. Individually, partners, you decide. There's so many ways you can scaffold an activity like this. So that might be one way. You might give them that same picture, but with a word bank and then some sentence frames. Or you might start with simple of just saying, okay, what is happening in this picture? Who do you think is going to win the race? Do you like to compete in sports? You see how I'm adding in vocabulary? So those newcomers might not know what the word compete is, but I'm exposing to them to that word, and I can keep talking about it. So there are a variety of ways that you can use a picture prompt every single class. You might want to use one that connects to the content you're teaching, or you might just want to use the same one every day where they're developing, a different picture prompt every day where they're developing a variety of tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 words. We have a variety of teachers using these every single day inside of our Equipping ELLs membership, and they have said that this has been one of the biggest transformations they've seen with their students is their growth of speaking and writing, because every day they know when they come in, this is what's expected of them, and they really start to come up to that level of expectation and go beyond it. And so again, if you think about your first 5 or 10 minutes of your lessons, if their brain is getting ready to speak in English and it's prepped and thinking about vocabulary in English, they're going to be ready for the rest of your lesson. Over coming in, maybe getting off task, and having a hard time getting started in the lesson. So use this, have it on the board before they walk in, decide how you're going to scaffold it, and let me know how it goes. Just remember, keep it simple and repeatable. Confidence doesn't come from complicated. It comes from consistency. That's one of the best things we can do for our students is to create these systems that are consistent, that they know what to expect, they know what to do. It will help them thrive. All right, let's move into week 4. We want to focus on building systems and routines during week 4. So you've built trust, you've gathered data, and you've delivered support. Now let's make it sustainable. So your goals this week are to create a weekly schedule that includes whatever your schedule looks like. So if that's pullouts, push-ins, planning time, whatever that is, look at your schedule, look at your group of students and see how can you create a schedule that works best. Or using the one, I know sometimes you have a schedule that really doesn't work best, but you got to make it work. So just really looking at your schedule, big picture, what can I do to make this as best as possible for both me and for my students? Then you want to take that schedule and you want to start small. So look at what kind of routines can you set up? If you are meeting with your newcomers every day for 30 minutes, what can you do so that in that 30 minutes, you are helping them build the foundation of English and moving forward? Now, in our newcomer program, we have that set up for you where on Mondays, you introduce new vocabulary, you read a book with that vocabulary in context. Every Tuesday, you do a grammar skill that was in that book, so it's in context. Every Wednesday, you play a speaking game. Every Thursday, you do a reading activity. And every Friday, you do a differentiated writing activity. So having that set up, one, helps your students really feel secure and helps them to quickly advance. And also it helps you in your lesson planning say, okay, it's Monday. What 6 words am I going to introduce today? How am I going to introduce them? It helps you to have the framework to plug in what your students need and maximize the time you have with them. So things like that. Monday, maybe it's for your intermediates. Maybe you see them 3 times a week. So maybe every Monday you front load the story you're going to be talking about and do some building background. Maybe on Wednesday when you see them, you really go deep on the reading passage and you do some closed reading activities. And then maybe Friday you do a follow-up writing activity. So you're just really being intentional about the way that you are planning your lessons to support your ELLs. Now, again, start small and be open to change, but stick with it for a while. I think a lot of times, we even feel this from from leadership when they're constantly changing the curriculum we're using or the standards when things are working. So don't give up so easily. Commit to this for a month. I'm going to try out this routine for a month and see how it works. And then I can start to adjust when it's not working. Now, the other thing to be really mindful of by this 4th week is just those mini routines. And this is more about the classroom management side. So really explicitly teaching, especially for newcomers, here is how this class runs. When you walk into the classroom, this is what you do. Here's where you store your materials. Here's how we transition between tasks. Here's how you go back to class. All of those little things, if we don't tackle them from the start and really set the standard, can quickly derail us from the academic learning that we want to happen. So take some time to do that this week as well. Like I mentioned, we have newcomer classroom routines, we have newcomer curriculum, but again, just be mindful. What do you want your classroom to look like? Things like labels help your students really have a say in the classroom. They help to visually see and start to learn words in English. We have these in bilingual, multiple different languages. So again, just being really mindful of setting up your classroom so that there are systems in place that your students, regardless of their language level, can really thrive in. By week 4, hopefully, this is where things begin to feel manageable. Systems are what keep you from reinventing the wheel every week. Systems are what keeps your students feeling really secure in your lessons. Systems are what help you to not feel that weight and that burden of having to plan every single night for the next day for multiple groups and to keep going on that cycle. We want you to get off that hamster wheel of lesson planning. There are ways that you can get better. Let's review the 4-week roadmap to go from overwhelmed to confident. Week 1, build relationships and observe. Week 2, gather that data. Week 3, plan simple supports. And week 4, build routines and systems. You don't need to know everything. You just need to focus on the right things at the right time. And remember, when you start strong, you make everything that comes next easier for your students, for your teachers, and for yourself. If this roadmap gave you clarity, let's take it a step further. First, you can check us out on Equipping ELLs. We have a variety of videos out to help you really clearly see what to get set up each week, what kind of resources you can use. And if you want to take advantage of all the resources that we have done for you so that your setup is a breeze, then come join us inside the Equipping ELLs membership. And as a listener of this podcast, you can use the code TAKE10OFF to save 10% on your monthly or yearly Tier 3 plan. So make sure to use that. Take 10 off. You'll lock in at that price at the 10% off, and you'll get everything you need and more to get you set up, not just for the first 30 days, but for the entire school year. Thanks for tuning in today. You are doing important work, and with the right plan and support, you can lead with confidence all year long.